Hello, everyone. This is Justin Cobb coming to you from Arlington, Virginia, US. And today I have a very special guest with me. Her name is Abigail Finck. Abigail is a leadership coach with the Sojourn, and I cannot wait for you all to meet her. Abigail, thank you for coming on to the show.
Yeah. Hi, Justin. Thanks so much for having me. I'm coming from New York today, but in Kingston, New York, which is like about an hour and 40 minutes outside the city.
Nice. Abigail, so before we get into questions, can you tell audiences a little bit more about what it is that you do and what you aspire to accomplish?
Yeah, sure. So I've spent over 15 years building programs around the world, predominantly in the US and Middle East, North Africa, all designed to foster connection, empathy, and resilience across all different types of diverse populations. And sometimes that early in my career, that looked like advocacy and mobilization. Then it was global education. Then I was in impact-driven startups. And then I started my own business as a leadership coach, as you mentioned. So I'm a leadership coach and executive coach and leadership advisor. Now I run an organization called Sojourn, which is based on this idea that we're on this planet for a short amount of time, and what we do with that time matters. And so how do we support one another to live the most full, authentic versions of our lives possible?
There, Abigail. So let's dial back the clock, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
There. Tell me more about what it was like for you growing up, because you and I have spoken in the past about how some of your challenges led you into the work that you're not only what you're doing now, but even earlier in your career. Can you give me a sense of what it was like for you growing up and how that ended up being an influence?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking that. It's fun to think, it's interesting to think back to our young life and see how that influences us. But what I'll say is, so I grew up a few blocks from the beach. I grew up with a really encouraging and creative environment. My mom is still an educator. She's really creative, really allowed me to like dream. And my dad was a principal, so you can kind of imagine the energy that my house was like. But I also was around a lot of adults because when I was 8 years old, my dad was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, also more commonly known as ALS, or, like people will know it from the ice bucket challenge. And basically what that disease does is it slowly, for whatever reason, they haven't figured it out yet, interrupts or interferes with the messages from your brain to your muscles, so they atrophy, and so you slowly become unable to use the different muscles of your body. So it's this really devastating disease. And to watch my 6'5" principal of a kindergarten through 8th grade principal of a 5th grade to 8th grade school kind of diminish has really impacted my understanding of the world. I think it was when I first learned that life wasn't really fair. It didn't always make sense. And I started to have this perception of like, kids my age were maybe worrying about what Abercrombie t-shirt they were going to get at the mall that weekend. And I felt really disconnected and isolated from that type of conversation because I was at home helping, for better or worse, my dad's life come to an end. And that went on for a few years. He lived longer than, most doctors expected him to. And while there was a lot of joy and a lot of support during that time, it obviously fundamentally changed how I view the world and how I oriented towards like what was important. It was really clear to me that time was finite. And what was the point of this life? And to start having those conversations as an 8-year-old changes, obviously wasn't in this language, but it changes your trajectory for sure.
I was really moved by how this is all happening to you when you're a young child. This is not something you would wish on anyone. Like, what was sort of the response? Like, how did your family members react to you suddenly having this more, shall I say, I don't even want to say elevated, but a more mature grasp at such a young age?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I'm trying to like bring myself back to remember as a kid what it was versus like
Mhm.
my interpretation of it now. But um one, my mom was so skillful at surrounding me with human beings that could support, because I think she knew like, ooh, this is going to be a long, big road. And so I had my mom, I had my dad, but we lived down the street from my grandparents. And then also this woman, Polly, who at the time was really good friends with my mom, but has now become kind of like a best friend to me as well. And so I had a lot of adults that like cushioned me and allowed me to be wherever I was at any given moment. I think in general, I'll say since that time in my life, whether it's been with my peers or adults, like with my peers, it's always kind of been like, she's a little weird, or she feels like, she's having a different conversation than we are. And that was really hard for me, especially when I was, like a preteen and a young teenager. Um, and with adults, I feel like I've always got the feedback of like, oh, you are so mature, you're so wise for your age, or there was some recognition that what I was going through wasn't normal. And I think people waiting to see where I would go. So I don't know if that totally answers the question, but that's the most like, that's what came to mind when you asked it.
Yeah, and so here you are, and even so, you're growing up. You have all these insightful conversations. Can you walk me through the journey of how that led you to doing your work in the
Mm,
Middle East and North Africa?
yeah. Wow. So I remember I think that my dad's illness, it's one of those things like you were saying, it's like you wouldn't wish this on anyone. And I agree with you. And I'm so clear that that time in my life was made me who I am, along with many other points on my trajectory, but that being a huge one. And so, one, I think it made when you go through something that difficult, like not to get too graphic, but like breathe, like I was breathing using a breathing bag so we could change my dad's trachea. We were like his primary caregivers. It was not normal, to your point. And when you go through something that difficult, especially at a young age, you kind of have a few choices. You can collapse in it, or you can choose to like make this be for you, or to take what it is and move forward with the lessons from it. And for me, although I definitely didn't have the language then, I think I got much more connected to suffering and the understanding that people go through hard things, and what are we going to do about that. And I think there was probably the little kid in me that wanted some control over a situation that I had no control over, and it felt really unfair. And so I, from a young age, started getting involved in initiatives, clubs, organizations that helped the collective or looked at a particular pain point and said, what can we do about this? How can we increase or improve someone's life or a situation by a little bit?
Mhm.
So I think that the whole situation made me much more sensitive. It made me aware that what's going on the surface might not be what's going on behind closed doors. It made me aware of like all the support that we had in our family, how that like really helped us, and how support was actually a really important thing. And because I was oriented that way, it just felt really natural. After college, I moved to San Diego to work for a nonprofit that um, was all about ending a really like an ongoing war in Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Uganda. And I traveled around the country doing advocacy events, basically with young people in Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. And I started to really see a small group of people make a huge impact. That was my first job out of school, and um, we designed the first and one of the most viral campaigns of all time. I don't know if you'll remember it, but it was called Coney 2012. And so there's a lot to unpack there, but I saw when a small group of individuals deeply believed in something and like went after it, like, excuse my language, what was possible. And I saw child soldiers being rehabilitated. I saw families being reunited, and it unlocked like, oh, this is worth it. And there was hiccups there and lessons learned, but all in all, I left being like really proud and really inspired by what we were able to create. And then I went on to a global education organization, and this is where I worked pretty globally in the Middle East and North Africa. And our mission was to foster dialogue and understanding amongst the world's youth. And we specifically picked places where there was the largest dissonance. So hence US, Middle East. Even today, we can see the level of separation, othering, and devastating rhetoric that impacts all of us as learners and American citizens. So that was really profound work. It's some of my favorite work I've done. I was there as a creative director for about 8 years and got to travel around the world and connect with people and understand not just their suffering, but their joy and what made them tick and what they needed to feel like they were living fulfilled and connected lives. And that's where I really started to understand the power of human connection in a world that was becoming and is more and more digitally connected. And then, a little bit after that, around that, towards the end of my time there, I started my education for becoming a coach, a certified coach with the International Coaching Federation. And after that, I spent a brief stint working in like an impact-driven startup. So it was helping people get and stay sober and really designing a modern recovery for people who maybe traditional recovery models didn't work for. So instead of being powerless over something, it was about actually reclaiming you and yourself from an empowered place rather than a I can't place. Which was really beautiful. And I will just say, I really support all forms of recovery. It's not about one being better than the other, but all of these things, including now running my coaching business for the last 6 years, have one common thread. And I think that common thread is helping people wake up to the power and potential that they are so that they can move whatever needle they want to move in their life, whether that's personal, professional, political, social, and allowing people to step into their full actualized potential. But I really like to say possibility. And if the possibilities of you are endless, how can I support you in reaching those?
Yeah, it's really telling because you have this very holistic sense of not just health, but even being, and a lot of this came from not only what you yourself endured as a child, but then also what you were witnessing and encountering as you were beginning your career. When you were talking about that, so you're really doing something that not a lot of people in the United States really do, is that when they go, a lot of people in the United States don't leave the US. And here you are, you're going to one of the places that they tell us we should not go.
Yeah. I would be lying if there weren't conversations with my mom about her being worried about where I was going and would I be safe and why are you doing this? And, I think sometimes it would have been easier. My first job actually ever out of college was working at, I temped at a financial firm, like a investment firm. And I had this choice to go so I worked for Invisible Children, which was the organization that did Cody 2012. And then I worked as a temp at this job, and I had the opportunity to continue there or to take this job at Global Nomads Group. And at the time, it was a very large gap in salary and all of the, the traditional security things that parents and most people would be thinking about. And I thought about it a fair amount, but I knew that my heart was in one place and not the other. And so that was what just had me go to Global Nomads Group. And I'm so glad I did, because that is where I started to really take all of the unlearning that I did in college about systems that weren't, equitable for different types of people. And I started to actually live what it would mean to like do work that would change that. So instead of intellectualizing it and talking about it, I started getting this real life experience. And what I'll tell you is like the places that I've traveled and the ways I've gotten to do it, one, I'm so privileged and very lucky to have done it. But it's been amazing. Like some of my best friends are like, were taking me around the world to see their family in Morocco and Jordan and Lebanon and all of these places that are gorgeous, and they're filled with incredible humans just like you and I that have dreams and that are working on their education and are looking to build families. And it was so formative to realize I could go to the continent of Africa, I could be in the Middle East, I could be in Texas, I could be in California, I could be where else? I like Peru, I could be in South America. And people are really similar. And we spend so much time acting like we are different and figuring out if you're in my camp or the other camp. And that was so much of what our work was at that time, was breaking down that othering that happens. And that is what informs and I think makes me a good coach. I can meet people and it's like my struggle is your struggle and your struggle is mine, and my liberation is yours and your liberation is mine. And so that can be personal in an individual coaching call, that can be for an organization, or that can be like our newest project that we're working on is actually going to different communities around the country to talk about belonging and loneliness and to actually bring us back home to each other, because that's what we're designed for.
Really are showing people that regardless of where you're at in the globe, we are human, and all humans aspire, like if we're all aspiring for something more, we want something not only better for ourselves, we want it better for the people around us too. And I was so moved by how you were talking to how like these are all connected, like you said, and you mentioned how liberation can be personal and it could also be systemic in a wider range. It's a very profound thought, to say the least. When you were all going through this work, doing what you were doing, going through your challenges along the way, I tell people all the time, sometimes, yeah, like the challenges hurt or they make us suffer, but we also can choose what we do with it. And like you said, you collapse or you thrive and you build from it.
Yeah.
What lessons did you learn from your struggles?
Yeah. Well, I think if I go back to childhood, I do think that like we innately need each other. Support is critical and community is critical. That's what like got me and my mom through what we went through. And then when I think about traveling around the world and learning what I didn't know, like, I don't know, not everyone listening to this will be seeing me, but I'm a white woman, like I grew up in a affluent place. I had a lot of like white supremacy and superiority stuff to work through, like we all do. It's like the water we're swimming in here in the United States. And so when I was doing this work, I was coming up right against how my like unchecked biases would be harmful. I was bumping up against what I didn't know and assumptions that I had just made that I had never questioned in the work that I did professionally. And it started in college. I was part of this incredible leadership program that paired leadership with the civil rights movement and the jazz music movement. And so that was like,
that's incredible.
And that changed my trajectory. But doing the work at Invisible Children at Global Nomads Group, and even up until now as a coach, it's like the jobs that I have picked have required me to face what I don't know or the ugly parts of what have been conditioned in me, to understand them, to unfold them, to forgive them, and to move forward. And I think in that process, there's a ton of unlearning, learning, grief, pain. And the lessons that I've learned from that is like, you have to be willing to face the fire and like let it burn a little bit so you can get to the other side, because the other side is where all the good stuff is happening. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. And that's the good, when I say the good stuff, it's like the good stuff for me and the life that I have and my ability to like process the world that I live in, but also the good stuff of like community that's actually making a difference, and people who see each other as people and beyond some of the noise that, you know, this time is creating.
There's
We're all
definitely a lot of it. There's definitely a lot of the noise going on in the world. And I hear a lot of I, I'm sure you probably hear it in your circles as well, but in my circles, I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, I'm so anxious. I am so
yeah,
nervous," and it really does feel like, whoa, like
yeah,
there's so much riding here, and there is.
there is. And I will say there's so much, like one of my most at Sojourn, we do workshops and trainings for organizations or teams or groups. And my most popular one is navigating overwhelm. And it's talking about stress cycles and how to identify them, how to intervene with them. And everyone that I talk to, I ask the same question in the beginning. I'm like, so who has been stressed or overwhelmed in the last week? And immediately every hand right up. And I'm like, okay. And then we'll talk about what that looks like for people, because it looks a few different ways, but we all have our versions of it. And I will say that and the research that I do just in general for my body of work, it's showing. It's like we are more anxious than we've ever been. Anxiety, depression, panic, prescription for those things. The rate of suicide, especially among men, it's all skyrocketing. And I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think you're speaking to, we're living in an age where people don't know how to connect back in to their like full humanity and how to process the big, hard emotions that are here, because we're witnessing, I mean, what's the quote? Like, look for the helpers. Like, there's so many beautiful things happening in our world. And for you and I know we're slightly different in age, but let's just say our general group, we have lived a life post 9/11 where it's been monumental crisis after crisis after crisis. And we are seeing it through our phones, watching it on YouTube, arguing about it on the, in the comment section or at the table with our family members who we're supposed to feel safe and loved by. And we are intellectualizing these huge things, but I feel like we're missing the resources and the frameworks to actually move ourselves through the experience and the emotional, mental toll. And before we can even do that, we're like hit with another one. So how can we not be anxious? How can we not, be afraid for what's coming down the pike? And, people have all different responses to that, but I have a lot of empathy for everyone, including myself, that struggles with that piece of anxiety.
Exactly. And I feel like it's important to acknowledge as well, this world was built by people in the past who were not thinking about what it was going to be like for those of us living in it now.
Yeah,
And so so we are literally living in the fallout of what that old world was. And there's a reason why you have so many people who are clinging on to these ideas of what they wanted that world to be like. They built so much. And people think it's just about wealth. It's more than just wealth. It's also ways of being, it's ways of thinking and
yeah,
doing things. And all of those are crumbling around. And it's not just for the people who benefited from that, it's also the people who were marginalized from that as well. And it,
totally.
no wonder we're all anxious and don't and lost, and people want to escape and everything, and want
Yeah.
to check out.
And that's why I feel like it's so important to do work, find community, find support systems that help you bring you back. Like I call it to your essence, but the core of who you are. So it's like really looking at, and this is what I do in my work currently. It's like to look at the language that we use internally and externally, to understand our belief systems, our mindset, how we make sense of the world, and to recognize, like, to live an embodied life. So that means having a relationship with our nervous system where we actually are like talking back and forth with it, and to acknowledge like the body that you're in, the the community that you live in, the country that you live in, and all the implications of that. And if you kind of intersect all of those pieces of us, that's where you can kind of come home or find your true essence. And when we do that, the people that I have found that, and you talk about it in terms of ways of being, that have come back to their ways of being, have tapped into their authentic self, those are the people that are, I think, best suited to lead us in these times of like unprecedented change and this new kind of order that seems to be emerging, right? Like we don't need political systems or courts of law to have human progress. It just happens. The world changes and here we are. So to your point, like how will we as a group of the collective people meet the moment of the time? And I don't have the answer to that. And if I did, we would be having a much bigger conversation and a lot more often. But
Yes.
I think that's the type of thing that we get to be exploring.
Yeah. So, and this was something I was curious about as well, because you talked about how you started Sojourn,
Mhm.
and Sojourn was started from all these experiences that you had that
Yeah.
led you up to that point. But can you tell us a little bit more about the moments that led you to saying, "This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to help empower leadership, and I'm going to empower this next generation"?
Well, I think sometimes it's like, what's the famous saying where it's like looking back, you
Mhm.
can see how you got here. But at the time, I didn't know that I was coming to this moment. But one, for sure, traveling around the world with Global Nomads Group, it blew up my understanding of human beings, my ability to empathize, to be um, connected to our shared humanity, and to allow, even when it was hard, to connect across distance and difference, and to sit with someone and to understand that we are the same, and to find that commonality before I would turn away from someone. Like that's a huge moment. Um, Another moment I think is my coach training. So I became a coach and I started to understand how to actually support people in tapping into their greatness, into the possibilities of them. And I've watched people, like I had a client recently who didn't come to me for this, but was struggling with some complications with his eye. Um, and after a few months of working together on like a level of presence, and he came for work purposes, the inflammation in his body was down and his eye healed. Like there's all these little things where it's like I don't advertise those on a marketing campaign, but I saw the power of when people reclaimed their power, what happened in their lives. So I was like, okay, this is incredible. Um, and honestly, I think the culmination was I was at a retreat for myself that I was a participant of that was around this concept of mastery and this idea of holding things loosely, and this idea that your life is a journey, it's not a destination. And I started to hold a little bit more loosely the work I was doing as a coach. And it reminded me of all of these identities, all of these roles. I was a storyteller, an advocate, a creative director, a program designer, an instructional designer, like all of these roles that I had played: a daughter to a terminally ill man, a daughter to a teacher, my mom, like the granddaughter of the first person in his town that went to college and created a totally different legacy for his family. And when I sat with all of those things, I was like, okay, coaching is one of the mechanisms that I can do the work that I want to do. But what is the point of the work that I want to do? And what is the legacy that has been passed on to me that I want to live through me? And then it became really clear. It was about bringing people back home to themselves, to each other, and if they chose, to the larger world that they're part of. And how could I do that? Like, one, yes, through my coaching with individuals and with teams, workshops, trainings, bringing people together to give skills for deeper connection, deeper sense of belonging, and effective leadership. Sure. And most recently, it's been, and I want to take it on the road. I want to take it to people who would otherwise never have the opportunity to sit in a training or do personal development work, and actually have conversations in a time in our world where we're like back to that idea of, or kind of collapsing in to our phones, to our silos, and really creating space for like, no, we're going to open back up and see what's possible here.
Was there a person, I like to call them a witness, and yes, folks, I am going to pull from the Black church on this. I'm going to use some of their terminology. Their props to you all. I love your words. I'm going to give you all credit where it's due. But in the Black church, for instance, they talk about witnesses in the sense of this is someone who sees something in you, and it is to help you, point you in the direction of your call, of your
Yes.
purpose. So would you say you had a witness or witnesses, and who were those people?
Oh my gosh, you're going to make me cry. I love this question. There's a lot of them. My grandfather, Fred Finck, for sure. He took me around the world via his National Geographic collection and encyclopedias. And I remember him saying, for better or worse, you can do and be whatever you want, and don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. And still today, when I'm, in self-doubt or imposter syndrome or whatever else, he's a voice that I go to. My mom for sure, but she introduced me to this woman, Polly, who to this day is a spiritual mentor and witness of mine. I think there's a few people and like professors that I feel really fondly of that at different times put those seeds in me. But more recently, a few people. So this woman, Krista, she is like my mentor and a really big partner with me on things with Sojourn now. A coach that I had for a long time named Lisa Foon, and another coach that I had named Paul Fowler. And then there's some friends that are in my immediate community, and one in particular is coming to mind. His name's Troy Mitchell, and he's just the constant reminder of like, don't you dare stop, and don't you dare second guess, where you're going and what you can create. And so those are just some of them. And there's so many others, to be really honest, and I can't really name them all without inevitably leaving someone out. But I feel really lucky to have these witnesses. And I also just like, call me crazy, but I feel like I have a long line of ancestors too that are here and have my back. And whether they're like on this plane of earth or elsewhere, that's been a really huge piece of what like drives me and has me connected to this bigger conversation.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that.
Thanks for asking.
I tell people that perfection is the greatest enemy to anything, whether it be progress, it could be on your individual level, it could be on your political levels, you name it. But perfection is that idea and that sense of if I do not get it right, it will never be good. And Whereas, and I love how you bring in a lot of the coaching into this. You flip that script and you basically say, "I am worthy because I am, and I am
Totally.
achieving it."
Totally. And there's another piece of the coaching, and I love that you said it. It's like we live in a world that like feels safer with binaries. So right and wrong it's an either or conversation. And in coaching, it's like we actually take those off the table. It's not about right or wrong. It's about like connected, authentic or not.
Mhm.
And so um freeing people and freeing myself from the idea that there's a right way to do anything, because it's not true. There's how it was done, there's how it could be, and there's a million ways to get there, right? Like one of my favorite antidotes is like, if you're going to get to Hawaii, how are you going to get there? Most
Mhm.
people will answer like, I'm going to go online, I'm going to buy a ticket, I'm going to show up at the airport, and I'm going to fly. But it's like, you could pogo stick, you could do the worm to Hawaii, you could swim, you could, there's all of these, there's a million ways to get where you want to go. And to actually free ourselves from it has to look a particular way is one of the most like liberating and freeing acts and like services you can give yourself.
Mhm.
uh, and like when you give it to yourself, the freedom that you start to feel and the possibilities that open up are amazing.
Yes, there's a lot of people in this world who feel like they have to be this one particular thing because this was what was passed down to them, either through family, either through culture, either through whatever circumstance. But you don't have to be that, especially if you know in your heart of hearts. And I'm not saying all of these are bad. A lot of it is good. There are some good things that we get passed that we may have passed down to us as well. But the things that we know do not serve us, are not serving our best interests, the ones that do not keep us connected with ourselves or with the world, we can let those go too. We don't have to hold on to them. We can do different and better.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's harder than like it sounds, you've done some of this work. I've obviously done some of it to get to where I am. But when you're on the other side, before you realize that, it can feel so suffocating to
Mhm.
feel like you feel trapped or you feel like I have nowhere to go. I just have to do it this way. And I think it's really important to like reach out and get support in those moments to say, like, I think we all have this inkling of like, usually, like, I know there's something more possible, and to follow those little gut feelings because, um, yeah, I mean, one of my favorite sayings is like, tell me about the untapped possibilities of you. And people will freeze sometimes and they'll say, what do you mean? They're explain that to me. And other times people, it will just fall out of their mouth because they know. And there's been a deep knowing in them that they've been pushing down for a long time.
Mm, stay true to who you are, folks. Own your gifts, own your talents, own your skills. That is who you are. Your categories, your labels and titles, those are all well and good. But all of this you got going on in here, that is the greatest testament to.
Yeah. And to listen to that, to slow yourself down enough to hear that and to honor it as like worthy of having space and time, not, like a crazy delusion.
What
Yeah.
advice would you give to a younger Abigail if she
Ooh,
you?
ooh, yeah. Hmm. I think trust yourself more. Don't be afraid to get uncomfortable. I think I spent a lot of time, even still in little ways now, making sure other people understand where I'm at, wanting people to get where I am or what I'm sharing or why the purpose behind it. And I think it's like it doesn't really matter if everyone else gets it. Trust that the right people will. Um, and that you're on kind of the path that you need to be on. And the other just like motto that I think younger Abby actually knew without the words is like take your pain and turn it into purpose.
Alchemize.
Yeah, exactly.
Alchemize, folks. Make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think it's like we as adults, like we get to decide what we do with how our life went or how it's going. And when you realize that and you stop becoming victim to the circumstances of your life, and even if they're warranted, right? You start to create something incredible. And that's like my wish for people, is to slow down enough to connect with their inner wisdom, the miracle that they are, and to find what it is that they're here to offer. And to go after that, like once they know, to go after that like it's their life mission, because I believe that it is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, fulfill what you were here to do.
Yeah,
Yes.
all versions of it. Like some people will be like, well, I don't want to do what you're doing or at the scale you're doing it. I'm like, cool, mine isn't the right way to do it. This is
Mhm.
my way. This is how I'm doing it. And like, I've worked with people who I'm trying, I worked with a woman about probably 2 years ago who was having like miscarriage after miscarriage, and all she wanted was to be a mom. And obviously, like, I didn't get her pregnant. I'm not a magician here, but we did some really deep work, and for her to fulfill her purpose of being a mom. And we got there, and she has a healthy young boy that is thriving and well in the world. And it's like, that stuff matters. And that is just as important as the CEO of the Fortune 500 company that I'll do a training with. Like, it doesn't matter who or what, it's each person connecting to what like their purpose, their possibilities that they say that they want to create or reach.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Wow, that is so beautiful. You know, it actually leads into one of the questions I was going to ask too, is because even speaking from my own personal experience, I know I am the product of my community and the people who showed up, even in small things. And I keep thinking about how that's also one of the hardest things to do, isn't it? Some of us, we go about our day and we see people in our lives, we witness and encounter them, and those people are trying to figure it out. They don't know what they're doing. Like, and you, as a coach and as someone who's been through this herself, what advice do you give to folks who be there in support of others but aren't quite sure how to show up in that?
I love that question. Man, I think when I first started this work for myself, I became a little bit of a Judge Judy. I was like, come on, you need to see your potential. I see your potential, and let's go. And that actually doesn't work. So I would say in general, if you want to support anyone or yourself on a journey of like reconnecting to self and then others, it's like really working hard to put down judgment and this idea that people should be where one place or another, or away one way or another. So suspending judgment feels really important, and actually meeting people where they are, and to say like, okay, I don't fully understand why you're making X, Y, and Z decisions, but I can sit down with you. I can hold your hand. I can put my hand on your knee. I can look you in the eyes, and I can witness you. I can hear you. I can relate to you. I can share my own, whatever's relevant, where my story intersects with yours. And I can offer you space that what you have and what you're going through is valid. And that once we kind of move through that together, I can support you in taking whatever action you might want to take. And so for me, it's human connection. It's witnessing one another. It's really getting curious, like asking questions. Don't, even if you think you know the answer, even more so, ask the question. Get curious. And then if people want tools to do something about it, like, as a coach, I feel really well suited to give people those tools. But as an individual, you know, I can share my wisdom, or I can point people in the place to the places that have really helped me if I'm not going to be the one that's going to be supporting them. So um, that's what I would say. I think it's like connecting human to human, face to face. It's suspending judgment. It's getting curious, asking powerful questions. And then for me, like one of my goals is to give people the tools and skills to do this for themselves and to extend it out into their communities.
Mm. A lot of what I'm heard and that was this was the sense of just being there and being present in their struggles and just saying, you know what, whatever you are going through, you're gonna do it.
Yeah.
And
And I don't, and it's like not in this blind, like toxic positivity way that you do see some in some spaces, but I just, it's like learning how to foster communication and spaces that are rooted in relationship and belonging so that people feel a little bit less alone and they feel like they have someone in their corner, so that even if they have to borrow that person's belief until they can believe it in themselves.
mm,
You know, I've had a lot of clients who have said to me, like, the most impactful part of working together has been like your belief in me when I didn't have it until I could find it. Which is not why I set out to do this, but it's a beautiful just testament to where we are as human beings. It's like we need each other, and we're living in a world that's trying to separate us or replace us with great use cases for AI and technology in many ways. And we know that it's actually really harming our social capital in communities, and communities with lower social capital struggle, and democracy is threatened, and systems that support all people, regardless of what they look like, how much money they have, or where they were born, or what they do, can thrive.
we opened the door. Let's dive down into
Yeah.
what is this project that Sojourn is working on.
Wow, thanks for asking this. So Sojourn, as we've talked about, has been this like culmination of where I've been, who I am, what I've done for work, and the legacy that I want to leave on the world, right? And it's not so much about me, it's like what I want to create in the world, and leave behind. And one of the key pieces of this is like, how do I make conversations like this, like you and I are having, accessible to everyone, to my neighbor, that I, like politically, I can tell by the flag on his home, we don't agree, to people who might not ever walk into a training room that I work in and have had the privilege of being part of, or individuals who can afford a coach or therapy or some type of support for themselves. So we have this idea. On the Road with Sojourn is a nationwide storytelling project that's all geared towards addressing the loneliness epidemic, and to look at what happens when we come face to face, human to human, to have uncommon conversations, to find what is common between us. And this one, it feels like it's meeting the moment of where we are right now in the world. It's like everywhere I look, there's this othering and separation. And like I was just saying, I don't believe that that is in service of where we're going as a society, where our world is going. And so how do we combat it? And how we do it right now is we're actually fundraising to outfit a custom Airstream that's going to basically be like a podcast. Imagine it's like a podcast on wheels meets like your favorite friend's living room to hang out in. And we're going to go around and actually go to places where people are already gathering and ask them about belonging and loneliness. Yes, everywhere we go, we'll have some conversations about that, but also whatever it is in their life or at whatever event that might be relevant, to understand what we all have in common. And so we go where people gather, we have uncommon conversations via really powerful questions, and then we leave people with we call it the belonging blueprint, but a toolkit on how to foster meaningful connections in general across distance and difference, whether that's belief or regional lines or whatever else, and how to create more moments like this in your community, whatever your community is. And along the way, we're going to be telling stories. So that's kind of the gist.
So what I'm basically understanding is that you're traveling around the country, meeting people where they gather, and having these conversations with them about what it means to, like, essentially what it means to be human and how to tap into our possibilities, regardless of what our circumstances are.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, beautifully said. Thank you. Yeah, I think the only piece that I want to underline is like the other piece is how do you make that, how do you support people making that sustainable in their community? So we're starting in New York State because that's where I am. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this call, I'm having this homecoming moment to where my grandfather grew up, who is my like original house of belonging. And so to start here feels really important. And then depending on like the interest and the funding, and we have all of these like rubrics to say like where we'll go next, we'll start to go to places like I really want to go to Detroit, to Texas, to Utah, to California. So over time we'll be going across the country.
That'll be awesome. Dress warmly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we might wait till the spring. We'll see. But
oh my gosh, but that's incredible. And you're making it accessible. Instead of making people come to you, you're gonna come to the people. That is one. It's that in itself could be its own like little documentary or something.
Yeah. Yeah, if you know anyone that wants to capture it, we're looking for them. So let me know.
Oh my goodness. And then like, I'm just so excited for you.
Me too.
Oh my God. I'm like, it's like I feel like I know I can't just like hop in, but then it's also like when I hear it, I'm like, oh wow, how do I
get in there? Yeah.
Right.
I will say something that's been really cool is as I've shared it, that's been predominantly the response. People have wanted to either get like heavily involved or they're like, can you bring it here? Can you bring it to this community? And people really get it. And I think that just speaks to the need for spaces that foster a relationship and have us like kind of rediscover the things that make us uniquely human, which are the ability to emotionally connect. We're like social beings. We're literally designed and need each other. One of my favorite statistics is like babies can survive for days without newborns, without food and water. They can't survive without human touch. And so why do we think, and then there's other research that's like, you need 12 hugs a day to be thriving as a human being. Or actually, I think 12 actually might be like to maintain, and you need 18 to thrive. And think about all the humans, including myself, that have not gotten 18 hugs a day for a long time. And I'm someone that had support and through struggles had senses of belonging in community. And I still struggle with loneliness. I still struggle with isolation. And so I'm like, it has to happen for me. We're just starting to see the full impact of, 20 years ago, all of us moving online. I'm part of the last generation that will know life without a phone. It's crazy to me. A cell phone, I should be specific. And we're just starting to see the actualized harmful outcomes of that. And we're unleashing AI, which, there's beautiful use cases for it, as I mentioned earlier. But I also know there's going to be some damage done too. And I refuse to let what is so uniquely miraculous and beautiful about humans and the human spirit to be lost in that. And so this project is also addressing that. right? It is loneliness. It is belonging. And it is, this matters. This humanness of us is important.
Wow. It I need a moment. I'm just like so blown away. I'm like
Take a
you,
moment. It's okay.
like after a ride and you're like when a roller coaster or something and you're
Yeah.
done, you're like, whoa. Like that's me right now. I'm like
Hey, take it.
it, but it's incredible. And I love the concept, and I also love the purpose and the intention behind it. You're reconnecting to each other, reconnecting to ourselves. If we did more of that, if we took the time to really understand that in of itself, I feel like half of the issues, and I tell people all the time, kindness alone will not solve all the problems we have in this world, but kindness makes a huge difference and does a lot of the heavy work for us.
Yeah.
Everything else is just strategy and like effort.
Yeah. Totally agree. And I agree with you that if more people prioritized, or more people in more spaces prioritized sitting down with ourselves, sitting down with each other, even if, especially if there's big differences between us, I know that the world would be a better place.
Yes. So, Abigail,
Yeah,
we're coming up on time
I know, man. Okay.
there, but for folks who would love to collaborate with you or get to work with you in any capacity or coaching this project, what's the best way to do that? So,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So great. So my website is withsojourn.com. So you can always find me there. And I also am a really big LinkedIn gal. So you can find me, Abigail Finck, at LinkedIn as well. But right now, I would say there's a lot of opportunities to work together. So if you're feeling called to do it, reach out. We'll have a discovery call and figure out how and what is the best way that we can support you. And if you're interested in on the road specifically, please get in touch, because that's just gaining momentum, and we're really building a collective of people who are going to actualize it and help us bring it to different communities. So we need all the support we can get in that part right now.
yes, reach out to Abigail, folks. She is ready. This world needs not only what she is doing, but all like connectivity, reconnect with each other. It's okay. Like, put down the phone if you have to. If anything, that's encouraged. Put down the phone for a moment, reconnect, find yourself, find your purpose, live again. Abigail, thank you for coming on to the show.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun.
Hello, everyone. This is Justin Cobb, and that was Abigail Finck. She's fantastic. I'll leave a link below to the comments so you can check out Abigail's profile as well as Sojourns on the road, so that way you can find out more about how you can get involved. It's fantastic, and I am so grateful to be creating this content for you all. Be sure to check out Insight across our various platforms. Be sure to like this video and to comment, let us know what you think about Abigail's mission as well as Insight's purpose. It means the world. And be sure to share us with your peers, your networks, your family members. Be sure to subscribe so that way you don't miss an insight. Check us out on our various platforms, including Medium and Spotify. You'll find exclusive insights there that you won't find anywhere else. I am so grateful to be doing this work, and I can't wait to share more insights with you all. Thanks for watching, and until next time.